Hi everybody, Scott George here again. This is another quick episode of the Wolf and the Neural Network. So, as part of the Wolf and the Neural Network over the last 4 or 5 years, I documented what are known as target audience analysis events, TAA events. Each one of these events I assigned a 1%, no matter what evaluations was applied or how obvious it was. Just that it was reasonable to state there's a 1% chance that this was a target audience analysis instance. And you'll see what is target audience analysis. See, I had found my phone's GPS location set to a residence in Stillwater, Nova Scotia. When you check the land registration dates, it matches these dates with a company named EMIC, who was working for D&D at the time. Now, this is a subsidiary of a defense contractor, SCL Group, and a sister company of Cambridge Analytica, the one involving global scandals and what have you there. Now, if you also check the land registration date of July, it's July 5th, 2019. It also matches the start date of Dan Kinsella, Chief of Police. You'll see how that bleeds into that, but that's another topic. So, what I want to talk about is so I gave 1% to these different events so we could go back, analyze them, and properly discuss them, right? So instead of so what you would do is add them all together. And I've got 15 really good events, and you'd be like, Scott, some of these obviously were. You're only giving it 15? And it's like, yes, because I want to start from that premise and work up so we can have a discussion, because that's the best way to approach this, right? So I'm going to give you a good example of one of them, okay? So, back in January 2022, I had got this Snapchat friend request from somebody named Judy Ross 2022. Now, if you go look up Judy Ross, which would have been assumed the first thing I would have done, right? You see that they did their first book, the primary book you're going to find is on wolves. Now, when you go back and check that EMIC location, you can see that they were running psychological warfare out of Nova Scotia, and they chose to use howling wolves. This was confirmed by Brett Ruskin, David Putchlees, two journalists, and confirmed by the military themselves that they were running these operations in Nova Scotia, right? And during the investigation at J.D. Irving through the end of 2019, early 2020, I used animal behavior, more specifically dogs and wolves, and howling to explain their behavior alongside of my professional and technical reviews, which were really good. And so you have this correlation with EMIC now using howling and everything. I can show they were targeting me, but now this Judy Ross with these wolves, but it goes even further than that. See, Judy Ross was known for making other books, animal books. So there's books about moose, black bears, owls, wolves, and Canada goose. A lot of you read these actually as children, right? But then it gets a little bit more specific. See, I'd also said at the time, this isn't what I want to do. I would just retire on a lake with like 3 dogs. Now, if you check the next books that she writes is about living on a lake and retiring on lakes. And you're like, okay, Scott, okay, whatever. Right. That's why it's 1%. It wasn't even on the map, really. It was just kind of like, well, that's interesting. Okay. So let's jump forward to 2023. Again, I get Judy Ross now, 2023. I get this another edition. Something like Layla Li. Where is that name? Layla Li. And I'm like, okay, so obviously anybody watching Foreign News, I would have gone and Googled it. The first thing that pops up seems to be this physicist from Duke University, right? So I'm like, well, that's interesting. Now I get this certificate. Now, I send this certificate to myself, but you can also check the date on the file, on the actual file itself. It says January 5th, 2023. Now, if you check actually the bottom of the certificate, it says January 6th, 2023. So, putting aside every other coincidence, think about what I'm saying here. I just happened to also find this certificate one day before it was actually supposed to be issued. Right there, first search result. This person's now also adding me to Snapchat. And Judy Ross, 2023. A theme from a year before, and now a year later. That's right. But you'll also find, guys, that on every January 6th, I would send out the same letter about repeating things in mathematics and stuff. And this would have happened on that January 6th. That's right. So, it's very clear these parties knew what was going on. See, back in 2021, I have other instances of TAA throughout this, right? There's another good one in 2021 to do with Burchell's lightning protection and Burchell's LLP. And during that period, I think I solved something to do with math. Like, it was actually like, I didn't like it. I'd asked for some assistance with it. I didn't make it a big part of anything. I actually turned it into a reverse enigma. So I could actually have multiple success vectors, because I knew they would try to leak something like that, right? It doesn't change the overall abuse or anything that happened, right? And you could use it to catch anybody that was leaking any type of information. So I never sent that out to anybody. I didn't do anything, but now I'm getting this physicist adding me #1 at Duke University, and I'd asked those people to send me mathematicians and physicists. That's obviously to cause over-association, just as was with the Judy Ross entry, right? That was the entire goal of these people, right? Psychological warfare to drive over association. Now, what's important, though, is during this same period, my mother was lying dying in a hospital. I had blood and blisters all over my feet from walking to see her. They were deleting these Emmett contracts from the website as they're engaging in this psychological warfare against me, having RCMP showing up and threatening me. As I'm walking, trying to deal with my dying mother who has severe disabilities and needs somebody. These people are literally sitting there planning on how to screw me over. Now, go back and look at 2023. At the same time, they gave Irving Shipbuilding $1.6 billion. Jamie Irving becomes executive director of Post Media, and they get all the money from Bill C-18. On the morning my mother died, they showed up. She's got blood pouring out of her eyes. They showed up to fuck me over, to control the narrative. Neighbors reported lights in my house, 1:30 a.m. Somebody in my family said that they were in line at Tim Hortons. Somebody came in, started saying they were from CSIS and all this stuff, and then just walked out. That's right, everybody. So, as they were there giving everything to Daddy, they were sitting there thinking of how to fuck me over right to the moment as the blood's coming out of her eyes. How to make me look crazy, and how they could get out of this. To cover up a violent sexual assault, all the abuse they engaged in. So everybody, look at what Tim Houston really did. You go back to May 2019, RCMP had to drop the case against Mark Norman, right? So it was a big embarrassment. They needed to frame somebody. Boom, my wallet goes missing, ends up at HRP. Jim Perrin gets control of it and then gets lucrative transfers to JD Irving. That's right. I then get stalked up and down the road. They set my phone's GPS location to that household to make it look like I'm snooping around or have something to do with it. That's right. And then even the military and D&D say, oh, it's Russian disinformation or something, to make me look like a Russian fucking spy. So they could cover up for their fucking failures with Mark Norman in 2019. That's right. And now they're getting all this money, fucking with me on these same days, showing up. That's right. So when you look at Tim Houston, he knows Kristen Gary Lynn Home covers up a violent sexual assault. He knows they all committed fraud. It's audio recordings. I've got the records. That's right, but he installed Karen Oldfield as the CEO and registrar, or the CEO of Nova Scotia Health Authority. So you want to know why he showed up the night Mom died? Because they knew they were both facing multi-million-dollar litigation. Dan Kinsella was in a lot of trouble. The contracts match his date. They retaliated violent sexual assault, so they all got together and retaliated against me. And you want to believe CTV knows about it. But they're all benefiting through Bill C-18. That's right. They know I was violently sexually assaulted. They know I was abused. They know all this evidence exists. Tim Houston is a dirty fucking human being. He is a sex offender. He is a fraud, and he will help a bunch of dirty fucking cops frame you and your families if it just gets him ahead a little bit. And you got to ask yourself, where's CTV and stuff with all this evidence? Because they're a paid propaganda news network. Right? They know how dirty this is. They see all this evidence. They see Patrick Kieran, Ron McGeer, Tim Houston, all of it. But they were counting on those dirty records, because if not, they have to explain to all of you. These are the dirtiest fucking human beings you could even possibly imagine. Tim Houston is a sex offender, and there's absolutely no way I'm backing down from this. I am not going to stop until he faces 15 years in a prison cell, and I am demanding a RICO investigation. And I'm asking for domestic terrorism charges against Tim Houston, against Jessica Welk, Chad Sanford, and Justin Hall. Mike Duham, Dennis Daly. I'm asking for each of them to be registered as sex offenders. All right, everybody, have a good day.